Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and its tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And my name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed Navy videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that the government has admitted that UFOs are real,
Or at least that the videos were authentic.
it raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
Right? They may still be unlikely, but there's so many explanations for these stories. Even if the truth is more mundane than you're hoping, if any of it turns out to be true, whew,
Woo! It's a very exciting time. Oh my God. Chuck, you picked
Scott.
a hell of a time to
Yeah,
drop
no
off the
kidding.
podcast for a month.
No
I
kidding.
have been so off my game. I've been having to record episodes by myself. I recorded an
Oh,
episode with Annie. I texted you last night like, "Hey
yeah,
buddy, are you feeling up to recording tomorrow?" And you were like, "Oh, I thought it was a skip week."
yeah.
And I'm
You're
like,
like,
"No, it's a
no,
recording
there are
week."
no skip
You were
weeks.
totally right, for the record. It was absolutely a skip week. It's just that I've gotten so in the zone of like doing it weekly. It didn't even occur to me
Hey,
that
I
you'd be
mean, if this
back, and it
is
would.
if this is the new normal, like whatever, that's fine.
Well, let me tell you, it's a good week to record.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, we
some
got some
some
stuff to talk
pretty
about.
major news dropped, which we will be talking about. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, how are you doing, man? Like, it's been a
Oh,
month. In that time, you went on vacation, you
yeah.
moved house, you got COVID. Like,
Yeah, it's
you've had a rough go of it. How are you feeling?
hey, I got a promotion too. Yeah, it's been
Hey,
so
congrats.
it's been a absolutely bonkers month. I'm glad to be back. It was fun. It was actually really fun listening to recordings. I've actually never listened to our recordings because I generally don't listen to podcasts, uh, but no, it was fascinating to hear everything that you were talking about. I haven't listened to the
Mhm.
most recent, but I'll get
Yeah.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's been wild. It's been
yeah,
absolutely buck wild. Hell of a
it
time
sounds it. It
for
sounds
you to
it.
take a vacation.
Yeah, right.
So yeah,
But I'm rested and ready to go. Let's do this. I'm excited.
good, good. So I posted a recap to a friend the other day, and aside from the big
Okay.
news that we're talking about today, I think the main thing that you missed, which I just wanted to bring up in case you had a reaction to it, is um, Senator Gillibrand put forward two amendments. These are not NDAA amendments like we've
Okay.
normally been talking about. These are
Different kind.
Intelligence uh, Authorization Act amendments. I think it's the
Okay.
same thing as the NDAA, but for the intelligence community rather
Okay.
than the
That makes
military.
sense.
But she slipped in two of them. One of them is the oh boy, oh my
Yep.
god, where did my
You got
notes
this.
go?
You can do it.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chuck. You're gonna have to edit this out. I was trying so hard to have all my
We'll
notes
see.
ready, and this is
We'll
the
see.
one thing. Oh God,
I love
where did it
having
go?
the editor executive privilege of deciding when I want to make you sound smart and when I don't want
It's
to.
true. Yeah, you're back. I've got to defer to you. Okay. So yeah, we've got upcoming hearings, which we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, yeah.
But Gillibrand put forward two amendments. So the first is no funding for any UAP related programs that have not been properly disclosed to Congress.
Is that
Um,
UAP only or SAPs?
UAP, but the SAP part is implied as part of the program. So it's any
Okay.
programs that are related to studying UAP, whether
Oh,
it's
okay.
crash retrieval, whether
Okay.
it's reverse engineering, research, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was
The
like
interesting,
any kind of SAP program at all, which would make a lot of sense.
I think it's scoped to UAP. I might be wrong about that.
Okay.
But the thing that's interesting about this, and we'll talk about this on a couple of things today, there's a difference between what is the letter of the law and what we think the government will actually do. And this is one of the things
Yeah,
I was
right.
talking to Annie last week, and she was so completely unimpressed with any of this. She's like, whatever, they're just going to do what they want anyway, like the government always does. Like,
Just
she was,
ignoring all the nuance. Come on.
oh my God. She was so much further down the like, you can't trust the government. What the fuck is
Uh,
wrong with you vibe that I was. But
yeah,
I think it's important that even if these are black budget programs and they've already been illegally hiding their budget, I don't think they're
sure.
going to stop just because Gillibrand said you can't.
Right.
But I think it does help clarify the intent in the law. Hey,
Yeah,
these things do have to go through Congress. And if you don't, we'll take back your funding. And it implies the ability to apply consequences to programs
yeah,
that break
right.
those laws.
Totally makes sense
The
to
other
me.
one, which was a big deal and we were talking about last time, is she added an amendment that says private contractors have 180 days to
Mm.
turn over to Arrow any UAP material that they have received from the government,
Mm. Okay. All
which
right.
is
All right.
wild.
Yeah.
So we've been hearing rumors for a long time now that Lockheed, among
Yeah.
others, probably received at the very least UFO materials, possibly
Right.
up to and including intact craft,
Right.
when the government was trying to divest themselves of these things so it wouldn't come up in internal audits. So the
Yeah.
rumor is that this stuff was in the Department of Energy for a long time, which
Okay.
I thought was really weird because I hear Department of Energy and I think like
Yeah.
power plants, but the
Right.
Department of Energy was actually more about monitoring nukes. So it kind of makes sense. Like
Yeah. They
the
do a lot of
Manhattan
stuff.
Project, all of that stuff turned into the DOE. So they
Right.
already had heavy duty secrecy around stuff.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the rumor is they had all the crashed UFO stuff for a while. And then people were onto it and there was audits and freedom of
Right. Yeah.
information requests and they were like, we got to get this shit out of here.
Right.
And they handed it off to private industry. So
Yeah.
this is Gillibrand coming back and saying, yo, if there's any private contractors out there that received stuff from the government, you have to tell us about it and then give that stuff back.
Do you think that Arrow actually has the facilities to hold metamaterials or craft or whatever? Or is
That's a
this,
great question, buddy. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's really interesting. One of the rumors was that back in the OSAP days, so back when
Hmm.
Harry Reid found the 20 million for UAP research,
Okay.
the thing the 2017 article was about, Robert Bigelow's company was the contractor that got those.
Hmm.
Apparently, Bigelow went as far as to build a warehouse that was
Yeah.
intended to house all this shit,
Yeah. You
expecting to
kind of have
receive
to.
it. And then he didn't. So
Oh, shit.
I don't know if he repurposed that warehouse or what, but like I can imagine if
Yeah.
you're Bigelow and you're like, yeah, man, bring it all in. I got a house
Yeah.
built
Right.
for it. And they're like,
Yeah.
never mind.
Screw them.
Um,
Whatever.
so yeah, I don't know if Arrow has it, but presumably they will find space. I think
Yeah. I suppose
this
that's a
is
good point.
more Gillibrand calling their bluff.
Yeah.
Hey, you thought you were being slick hiding this stuff in private industry. Well, here's a law that explicitly says private contractors have to turn it over. Now, the thing
Yeah.
that's really interesting about it, and I don't want to harp on this too much because we talked about it
Yeah.
last
We
week,
got other
is
stuff to talk about.
um, it's got a safe harbor provision. Now, I've
Okay.
talked to you before
Yeah.
that I think this is the way forward. I think
Oh,
we
yeah.
need to do this. And explicitly, what this says is any private individuals or contractors who have received stuff from the government, if they turn it over within this certain period of time, the safe harbor provision, there will be no civil or criminal penalties for receiving this material. Now, it doesn't say it, but there's no reason to specify there won't be any consequences
Yeah.
unless
Right.
there will be consequences if you don't do it. So
Yeah.
potentially it has a little bit of teeth to it. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. I would be very curious. Like, I don't know. I've been watching a lot of Legal Eagle on YouTube recently,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like, there's just so many ways of like pushing things legally. I wonder if that's enough, or if the
Hmm.
Bigelow lawyers would be like, no, that's not enough. We're not saying shit.
So I encourage you to go listen to last week's
Yeah.
episode because I've got some
Okay.
quotes in there from Ross Coulthart
Okay.
specifically talking about legal issues around IP. He
Yeah.
raises the issue that some of these private contractors he's heard have gone out and retrieved craft on their own dime.
Oh shit.
So does this even
Interesting.
apply
Does
in
that
that
count?
case?
Yeah.
Like, does the government have the right to compel you to turn over something that you found yourself?
Oh yeah.
Foreshadowing, we'll be talking about that.
Okay. All right. Great. I'm excited to hear about
All right.
that.
So before we get to the meat, and I'll just go ahead and stop teasing it because our listeners will have already seen the episode title. The big news this week is Chuck Schumer passed the UAP Disclosure Bill.
Oh shit! It's happening.
Holy shit! So yeah, we will be diving into that. But before we get to that, let's eat our vegetables. I say that like this part isn't also really exciting, but compared to that, it feels like small potatoes. But we've got
Okay.
quite a bit of movement on the congressional UAP hearings. So I've been starting every episode with updates on this. And the thing we keep hearing is, yeah, we want it to happen real soon, real soon, real soon. So last week I mentioned that like the congressional calendar there's a couple of weeks left in July, and then they're off for the entirety of August. So if they don't make it happen soon, the earliest we'll hear from them is September. And Ross Coulthart was kind of like, I don't know if this is going to happen, buddy. Like, I think September is maybe the earliest we're going to hear it.
Yeah.
So this week, House Oversight Chair James Comer and Speaker Kevin McCarthy have signed off on holding a House hearing on UAP on July 26th, with Representatives Burchett and Luna taking the lead. So July 26th, it's happening this month. Burchett especially has been pounding the drum on this. He's been very clear. We want it to happen. We're lining up witnesses. So I've got a bunch of quotes here. Representative Comer, who has been very cautious to talk about this. When he did talk about it, he's like, well, I don't know anything about that. But, Burchett and Luna, they're sure excited. He said, yeah, they're very passionate about that issue. I've been surprised at the number of questions that I've received on that hearing. So I think there's a lot of interest. That quote, I think, is really good because it kind of clarifies that even the Congress people who maybe aren't fully on board with the topic are starting to see a tide shift in the public awareness and interest in the topic. So for Chairman Comer, who's, got no interest in sticking his neck out and tackling a weird topic, for him to even come out and say, yeah, a lot of people are interested in this, I think is really interesting.
So I don't know. 3 weeks ago, I saw someone on the subreddit say they wrote a letter to their congressperson, and their congressperson, or someone in that office, wrote back and said, "Hey, you're the first person who's written us a real, live, actual paper letter in a long time."
Mm-hmm.
And like,
in a long time, not just about UFOs, just in general. We didn't even know we still received mail.
and actually, is that surprising? I don't think it is, but it just reminded me that writing a fucking letter is like such a I don't know, it's arcane, but it's a big deal. So I wonder if the rest of the subreddit got that too.
We hear about this whenever you deal with something where they're like, call your Congress people. They're like, listen, you can send an email, you can send a text, yes, but these offices are built to deal with paper mail and phone calls. And ultimately, they respond much more to those forms of communication than to emails and texts. Now, the cynic in me is like, yeah, because that's what old people use. And they prioritize old people. Like, oh, we got a letter. This is from someone who doesn't know how email works. So we better listen to them.
But also the volume is so different. Like a text, like I can set up a robot pretty easily. I can't set up, as easily. I can't set up a letter writing robot.
We should set up a letter writing robot. But it does go back to the idea of, if you really want to get through to your representatives, phone calls and actual physical letters carry a lot more weight than texts and emails.
Yeah. Anyways.
So yeah, got some quotes from Representative Luna here. She said, "We got the hearing, we got the date confirmed. We will be releasing names of witnesses about a
Oh,
week prior. I promise you guys won't be disappointed. We have some great witnesses that have worked in previous administrations, both Democrat and Republican.
okay.
Um, we have been hearing a lot about multiple witnesses because obviously the one
Okay.
everybody's
Yeah.
interested in is Grush.
Crouch. Yeah.
And every time somebody goes and asks Burchett, hey, is Grush going to talk? He's like, obviously would love to have him, but we've
Yeah.
got a lot of witnesses we're trying to line up. And this
Interesting.
is the thing Ross Coulthart and some of the others have been hinting at is um, I don't know whether it'll be the House hearing or the Senate hearing or maybe both, but we are supposed to be hearing from more witnesses. Burchett has made it clear he wants to hear from pilots in
Mm,
particular, so we might
okay.
hear from David Fravor or Ryan Graves, any of the pilots from the Tic Tac or Gimbal incidents.
I just hope
But
the
yeah,
like Congress people actually show up this time.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like,
agreed. At the
I
very
don't know.
least, we know Burchett and Luna are going to be there. They're
All
frothing
right.
at the mouth about this.
There you go. So I guess
Uh,
that's something.
so Luna goes on, and this is the quote everybody's been getting from her. She says, "So what we're focusing on is getting the information out to the American people. Clearly, this is a big galaxy we live in, and there is very likely technology that we are unaware of where it's come from. And
Hmm.
so, does this pose a national security threat? But it's important that instead of trying to make this conspiratorial and poo pooing it, that people are
Hmm.
actually understanding that it is very likely that there's other life forms out there and we're not alone in this universe and that we can address these things with a scientific mindset."
Wow. Wow.
Now, that's a big quote, right?
That's
Like,
aliens. Like, I don't
right?
know.
Well, I got news for you, buddy. Luna's soft pedaling it. Listen to these
Really?
next few quotes.
Okay.
Uh, Tim Burchett, that's what it's about. Aliens. I think people deserve to know. Representative Mike Gallagher, when asked about UAPs, aliens. Just call them aliens, okay? Like, they, they're not like tiptoeing around it anymore, which is wild.
Oh my gosh, that's God, we hear the word disclosure and aliens in the same week. Like,
Oh my
what
god,
is happening?
buddy, buckle up! It's been wild.
Yeah,
Uh, we're still in the shallow end.
yeah. Okay.
Burchett goes on. He says, and this is, I think this is really interesting. He says, "We have the Pentagon pushing against us, calling some of our witnesses, telling them don't go testify before this committee. And if we have to, we'll use the power of subpoena and we'll
Hmm.
bring them in there and make them tell the truth because this
Right.
thing has been covered up." He goes on, he says,
Wow.
"Are all these pilots lying, risking their lives, their careers, their retirements, their reputations, everything they have for something like this?" I say no. They're not lying. They're telling the truth. Something's going on. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Hell yeah.
This is a line we're hearing more and more from them is it's not just Grush.
Yeah.
The Congress is hearing from many, 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 many witnesses.
Interesting.
And I've got a quote later from Rubio who hammers the same point, but it's like basically, like, if you want to tell me that this isn't true, you're telling me that either all of these individuals are coordinating a lie to us and they don't all know each other, or all of them are crazy.
Yeah.
And frankly, either one of those outcomes is equally
Seems
concerning.
unlikely. Yeah, right. Yeah. Interesting. Hmm.
Representative Gallagher, who's the one who said aliens, just call them aliens. When he was asked about the Grush claims, he said, "I'm not allowed to comment on them," which I think is
Not
interesting. I
allowed.
don't know why he's
Interesting.
not allowed to comment on them. Um, but he said, "But I think they should be taken seriously. Obviously, Grush's background is legit military, intel, high level security clearance, so you can't just dismiss him. And because you can't dismiss him, you're left with two possibilities. One, he's telling the truth. Two, he's misinformed."
Hmm.
I love hearing that from a congressman because this is the thing we keep hearing in the community is people are
Yeah.
like, "Oh, he didn't come forward with any firsthand evidence. He's just telling us what he's heard."
Right.
Yeah, but he's a guy who would be in a position to hear it. Like, he's
Yeah.
not some rando off the street, like, oh, my cousin's uncle works at
Right.
Nintendo and
Yeah.
he told me, right? Like, this is a guy with a need to know and clearances, and
Yeah.
he's telling us what he heard.
Which was literally his job. Like,
He's a credible witness.
yeah.
And if
Right.
you're going to try to tell me he's not credible, you've got to go pretty far on that. And
Yeah.
as Ross Coulthart keeps pointing out, they haven't been able to lay a glove on
Yeah.
Grush's credibility. The
Yeah.
only thing anyone has been able to say about him is no firsthand evidence.
Sure. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ross Coulthart, he had a quote this week. He said, within a very short period of time, there is going to be some revelation, particularly from the Congress, which makes this evidence so incontrovertible that the legacy media is going to have to play catch up.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right? Now, Ross's angle, of course, has mostly been annoyance at major media for not
Yeah.
covering it.
Sure.
But he's still making a claim there that
Yeah.
big news coming from
It's coming. Yeah.
Congress. Yeah.
But yeah, well, and he's been making that claim for a little while, but
Mhm.
it seems to be coming true. So,
It does seem
um,
to be coming true. And I don't know about you, buddy, but I'm thinking back to a while ago, we were getting a lot of
mhm.
quotes from people like, it's going to be a big summer. There's big
Yeah,
things
right.
coming, like in
Yeah.
June or July. And we're like, what could it be? Well, I think some people
Yeah, I
knew
think
that
we
some
know.
things were coming.
Yeah, I seem to recall July 9th being like one of the big
Mhm.
dates. Oh,
Right. Marco Rubio. This is actually, I think, a quote from last week, but I didn't include it because I had a lot from him last week. But this
yeah.
one really fits with the theme here. He says, listen, one of two things is happening here. Either they're telling the truth. And when he says they, he was in the context, he was talking about they have multiple first-hand witnesses.
Okay.
So he was making the point that they have a lot of witnesses, not just David Grush, people
Okay.
who support Grush's claims and have first-hand knowledge of these programs.
Okay.
He says either they're telling the truth, and that would be the biggest story in human history, or we have people in really important positions in government who are crazy or are making up stories and are still in positions of importance. Either one of these is a big problem. So
Yeah.
we've got to figure out which one of these two it is, because the second one in particular would be very troubling.
Yeah.
All we know is claims people have made. These are credible people that have done and continue to do important work for the country. And by law, we're required when they come forward as whistleblowers to take their claims seriously and
Yeah.
investigate them.
Nice. That's a great statement. Love
Right?
that.
And I think it's really interesting. I mean, Luna kind of hit on the idea of it being a flight safety issue again, but we are
Yeah.
increasingly seeing these Congress people move beyond the, well, I don't know if anything's up there, but if there is, it's a flight safety issue and we should
Right.
look
Yeah.
into it. And into more like, I mean, he said, biggest story in human history, aliens, just call them aliens. We're here
Yeah.
to
Right.
talk about spacecraft, like big, big quotes coming out of these people
Yeah.
that are moving beyond the kind of timid exploration of deeper waters and more into,
Right.
yeah, there's a story here.
Yeah. Ah, God, that's so cool.
All
Very
right.
exciting.
So before we get to the big news, I've got one
Okay.
last quote for you. And boy, it's a freaking banger.
Yeah.
Admiral Wilson was in the
What?
news this week.
Okay.
So someone reached out to him finally,
Yeah.
and he gave a quote. He said, the only thing I wonder about is why, as all this moves along, why hasn't Congress said, we'd like to hear from Admiral Wilson? Because he's
Yeah.
supposed to be the Wilson memo guy, right?
I mean,
Now,
he made it pretty clear that he did
he
not want to be
did. And
involved.
unfortunately, that's kind of the subtext here. So he kind of hints that maybe the reason he hasn't been asked is because of his previous denials. And he
Yeah.
doesn't say what he would say if he was called to testify, but the implication is that he would continue to deny it. He says, I just know that I'm pretty sure there are zealots on this one side. And sometimes I wonder if you speak the truth and the truth doesn't agree with what they believe, they don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't say which side is which. He doesn't say which side is zealots. He doesn't say what truth they don't want to believe in. But with Admiral Wilson, I think the context is pretty clear that he's saying the truth is there's nothing to this. I don't know Eric Davis. And the zealots are the people who want to believe that he had found a crash retrieval program.
Right.
But I will point out the fun side of my brain looks at that quote and goes, you know, he doesn't say that, but he doesn't say the opposite either.
Yeah.
You could just as easily read this as Admiral Wilson wants to tell the truth, and there are zealots who don't want him to, and if he tells it, they won't ask him to talk.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But he did end with a quote. He said, if anybody ever particularly invited me to testify or meet with them about the Wilson memo and things like that, I would have been more than willing to do so, but nobody ever did.
Yeah, great. Let's call him up. I think he'd be a banger in a skiff.
Oh, 100%.
Weird
100%.
statement right there, but
and there have been rumors for a while that there were going to be some high-ranking military personnel coming out, perhaps even a former admiral.
Yeah, okay.
You know, could I see a world where Grush's claims are validated and then suddenly Admiral Wilson comes out and goes, I was under orders not to talk about this, but yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty banger.
That would just be like such like frosting on the top. Like, all right, we went through all of this. Now we're bringing back Admiral Wilson. We're going to get that final closure. We're going to stitch this up. Yeah.
100%. 100%. All right. So let's get to the meat of the show today, buddy. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer introduced a new amendment to the NDAA. This happened on Friday at 4 p.m. So this is very recent news. Trash day, but also like this is hot off the presses.
Okay.
I got a couple quotes from Chuck here. By the way, I really confused our Slack the other day when I posted a link to this and included the line, "Go get him, Chuck," and everybody thought I was talking about you.
Yep.
So yeah, Chuck Schumer says, I am introducing new legislation to declassify government records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena and UFOs as an amendment to the NDAA modeled after the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment. Do you know much about the JFK records thing?
No.
Okay. So you're familiar with JFK was assassinated. You're familiar with all the conspiracy theories around that.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the fact that there have been classified files about this for many years, which fuel the conspiracy theories.
Sure.
Now, similar to the UFO thing, they had a long-running struggle with freedom of information requests about JFK stuff and not really getting anything. And eventually they passed a law that said any records relating to JFK's death must be declassified within 25 years of being created.
Okay.
Unless there is a national security reason not to.
Huh.
They are still releasing files today. Like in the Biden administration, they released a batch of files, and there are still files that the president has said must remain classified. So I want to be clear. This is not an automatic slam dunk. Everything goes public. If the JFK thing is the model, there is still stuff about JFK that is classified today.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about this later. The thing that's important is it creates the legal assumption, a legal default that these records should be public. So instead of defaulting to private, they are defaulting to public, and you have to make a case why they shouldn't be public. I do think that's a step in the right direction, even if I wish we got what Burchett had pushed for, which is everything's public now, no questions.
Yeah, right.
Ross Coulthart was like, this hasn't got a snowball's chance in hell of passing. I'm sorry. Love you, Mike, but this is not happening.
I guess I'm having trouble thinking about why something would be classified if it weren't for national security reasons.
Hmm.
Like,
Well,
I don't know.
so
Maybe
ignoring
I'm,
JFK for a
yeah,
moment, talking about UFOs, my understanding is everything about UFOs has been classified. And the analogy I heard someone give the other day is what you want to think about is when you're thinking about national secrets is nuclear weapons,
yeah,
right? So the fact that we have a nuclear program is not a secret. The
sure,
fact that we have nuclear weapons is not a secret. Nuclear research can happen in public. You are not allowed to do weapons development, but you can explore atomic energy and things.
fusion. Yeah,
Things that the military learns through nuclear research can eventually be declassified and passed down to the public. So that's kind of the model here. Weapons systems, national defense advantages, maybe craft that we have reverse engineered would not be
right.
declassified. But the fact that non human intelligence exists, the
Uh,
fact that craft have been
okay,
recovered, technology that they have that is not threatening to national security could be shared. But previously, none of it has been shared. The line was
okay,
just like, everything about this is top secret. So this would
okay,
be pushing more in the nuclear secrets direction of some of this should be secret, but not all of
okay,
it.
okay. I guess that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
That's good
Yeah.
context.
So Schumer goes on to say the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. We are not only working to declassify what the government has previously learned about these phenomena, but to create a pipeline for future research to be made public. I
Nice.
am honored to carry on the legacy of my mentor and dear friend Harry Reid and fight for the transparency that the public has long demanded surrounding these unexplained phenomena. So
Nice.
I think that quote's really
Beautiful.
important because he talks, look, I'm not just trying to get you the files about Roswell. I'm trying to make sure that when DARPA reverse engineers the crazy 0 point engine in the craft that could
Right.
solve all of our energy needs overnight, that has a pathway to come to the public and address climate change, right? Like I'm making
Yeah.
up an example, but
Yeah, right.
there are technologies that could come out of this that are not defense related. And he's looking to create a pathway for this stuff to come to the public. And more importantly, change the default expectation to,
Yeah.
by definition, this stuff should be public unless you have a good reason not to.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we'll
Uh,
see. It
yeah, yeah.
it seems like a good crack to open,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I have some doubts.
You're not alone. We'll get to
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Um, the press release has a couple of good quotes here. It says they talked about the context around why they created this. Congress uncovered a vast web of individuals and groups with ideas and stories to share. While these stories have varying levels of credibility, the sheer number and variety has led
Nice.
some in Congress to believe that the executive branch was concealing important information regarding UAPs over broad periods of time.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is a heavy sentence to come
It's a
from
big press
the
release,
Senate Majority Leader.
right?
So, first of all, we're not just talking about David Grush,
Yeah.
right? A vast web of individuals, sheer number and variety. They're talking about many, many witnesses. Last week,
Right.
we spoke about Ross Coulthart confirming that Congress has been hearing secret briefings on this for 2 years now. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about a handful of people. We're talking about
Yeah.
a lot of insiders who have
Yeah.
all been claiming things that are causing them to take it seriously. Also, for anyone like me who maybe wasn't paying a lot of attention in high school civics class,
Yeah.
when he says the executive branch, he doesn't mean the president, he means the military. I always
Oh,
forget the military
interesting.
is part of the executive branch, but
Yeah.
yeah, so
That
we've
makes
heard
sense.
that the Pentagon has been keeping this secret. I don't believe he's pointing the finger at Biden here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's so interesting because they do feel so different, but
Yeah.
yeah, they are same branch. Hmm.
Congress recognizes that these records, if they exist, nice little bit of waffling in the press
Yeah,
release,
right.
were likely concealed under the good faith goal of protecting
Eh,
national security.
sure.
However, hiding that information from both Congress and the public at large is simply unacceptable. Our goal is to work cooperatively with the executive branch to responsibly disclose these documents and bring the topic into the public sphere in a process the American public can trust.
Nice.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to bring this up for a while. I
Okay.
think there's a tendency to, once you accept that a secret has been kept,
Mhm.
to assume it was nefarious.
Mm.
And my view on this, and I don't have any more insight than anybody else, this is just
Yeah.
what makes sense to me based on people I know and human nature. I
Yeah.
don't think there are mustache twirling
No.
villains buried deep in the bowels of the Pentagon who are like, whoa, the public will never know.
Yeah.
I'm going to use this to enrich myself. I think these are patriots. I think these are people who, in the wake of World War II, the secrecy around nuclear stuff meant that it was natural for them to go into keeping it a secret. And I suspect when they started, it was with the best of intentions that they kept it secret. I don't think they intended to keep it a secret forever. But you and I both know the longer you tell a lie, the harder it is to back out of it. Once they've been telling everybody there's nothing to this, eventually you get to the point where if you now come out and admit it, you're confessing to crimes. You're confessing to the fact that you lied to the public, to Congress, that you concealed things improperly. It may have been for the best of intentions, but crimes were committed.
Yeah.
I understand how a well-meaning group of patriotic individuals could find themselves 70 years deep in what could only be described as a conspiracy, but who still view themselves as ultimately patriots, people who believe in America, who want us to succeed, but who view the act of disclosure to Congress and the president as ultimately too risky to take.
Yeah.
Imagine you're running this program, you've been heading towards disclosure for a while, and then Trump takes office. It was clear from the get-go that you couldn't trust Trump with a single goddamn thing. I
Right.
don't blame anyone for thinking maybe we shouldn't tell Trump everything.
Yeah.
But the problem is, once you make that decision, now you've got to apply it to everybody. So is every
Yeah.
president untrustworthy? Now we're ending up in a position where we don't trust the president. That's a line too far. So I
Yeah.
really like the way they phrased this. They recognize that these were likely concealed under good faith goal of protecting national security, but it is unacceptable. That's a great way to phrase it. I think it's a good way to move forward. I hope that that is indicative of, ultimately, if it does turn out crimes were committed, that they do take a safe harbor or amnesty approach to
Yeah.
this of, look, it serves no one's interest to
Yeah.
haul up a 90-year-old general who was in charge of Roswell and
Yeah.
throw him in chains. Like, it
No.
doesn't make any sense. We need
Yeah.
to move forward.
Right.
So I hope that's indicative of a path forward.
Yeah. I was just looking up like Hanlon's razor because I'm a big believer of it, but I feel like Hanlon's razor has some slight issues with its terminology. But it the Wikipedia page has a beautiful quote under there. This is a translation from a German thing that says, "Misunderstandings and lethargy perhaps produce more wrong in the world than deceit and malice do. At any rate, the
Hmm.
latter two are certainly rarer."
Yeah.
And
Ross
like,
Coulthart has a quote that he likes. He says, always assume a fuck up before a conspiracy.
yeah, that's totally the modern air. Yeah,
Right?
I mean that describes the government just perfectly, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine that much malice. The amount of malice it would take compared
Exactly.
to the amount of fuck up, it's like, oh yeah, that amount of fuck
Yeah.
up, that'd be easy.
Yeah.
Like,
All right. So we've danced around the intro quotes for a little bit. Let's
Okay.
dig into the meat of the bill. Now the bill is
Okay.
something like 30 pages long. Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but
Oh, okay.
I've pulled out some select bits that I think are really interesting.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, it creates a collection of UAP records, and then it creates a board to review those records and recommend that they either be declassified or continue to be classified. And then the
Okay.
president ultimately has authority to make decisions and stuff.
Okay.
Um,
Who's
so
which branch is holding the board? Do you know? Does it say? Like, is this
that
executive or?
is a good question. It says that
I assume it's executive.
it's appointed by the president with Senate approval. I don't actually know
Okay.
where it would
That,
fall in.
I
It
think
might
that would be
be
executive then.
executive because I think it's
Yeah.
military.
Senate
Okay,
and
so
Congress don't actually want to run boards. It's only
exactly.
yeah. Okay.
So, first quote, this bill would direct the National Archives and Record Administration, NARA, to create a collection of records to be known as the UAP Records Collection. Really complex name there, guys. Thank you. Uh, and direct every government office to identify which records would fall into the collection with a 300-day deadline. So basically, from the time the
Hmm.
bill passes, you've got a year to get your shit
Yeah.
figured out and hand it over to the
Okay.
record collection. The UAP records collection would carry the presumption of immediate disclosure, which means that a review board would have to provide a reasoning for the documents to stay classified.
Oh, cool. Okay. I love that.
Yeah. Now, after the records collection is created, the legislation will create a UAP Records Review Board, an independent agency which would consider if a UAP record would qualify for postponement of disclosure. Now, even just the language around this, I think, is helpful. It's not, should it be classified? It's
Right.
postponement of disclosure. Everything will be public
Hmm.
eventually. It's just a question of how far down the road are you going to kick the can.
Yeah. Right.
Now, as I said, that doesn't mean it will all come out. JFK
Right.
stuff is still being kicked down the road. But
Yeah.
like with JFK, there is a presumption that someday there will no longer be need to classify this.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
Um,
sense.
so let's talk about the board because the makeup of the board is really interesting.
Okay.
So the president will appoint the 9-person board with Senate
Okay.
approval. The bill says the intent is to select a group of people who would push for disclosure while protecting sensitive intelligence collection methods.
Okay.
Board members must be impartial citizens with no previous involvement with UAP programs.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we're not going to bring in the guy who's running the
Yeah.
legacy program now and put him in charge of
Right.
whether or
Yeah.
not his shit should stay secret. Uh, the makeup of the board uh, should include at least one current or former national security official.
Okay.
Lou
Yeah.
Elizondo, maybe? Uh,
I mean,
one current or former foreign service official, one scientist or engineer, one economist, one historian, and one
interesting.
sociologist.
Yeah. Okay.
People are going wild with those last three
I
because
mean,
I think we all expected a board who is reviewing whether some shit should remain national secrets would be made up of government types.
yeah.
And here they're saying, like, no, the people who are considering whether this stuff should go to the public include an economist.
Yeah.
Is this going to destroy the economy?
Yeah.
A historian. Can people handle this? Does this
Yeah.
rewrite our history? And a sociologist. There's no reason to put a sociologist on this board unless you're worried about the social impact.
I mean, yeah. But of all the things, that's the big focus, right? I'm glad they have
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
sociologist. Yeah. So that was only
Totally.
like five, right?
Yeah. So they were just saying there has to be at least one of each of
Okay.
these represented, and then the
Cool.
president can fill in with the others as he wishes.
All right. Nice.
And then another important note, and there's some details here that I'm not going to get into the weeds with, but in a nutshell, the board members will be given the necessary security clearances. So
Good.
they're trying to sidestep the thing with Arrow not getting their clearances. Like, the people on this board need to have the clearances to look at the material they're declassifying.
Oh my God. Yeah. Um, So the first statement was like no previous UAP. So that would discard Lou Elizondo, right?
No, they meant the people running the like crash retrieval and reverse engineering
Oh,
programs.
okay.
So
Okay.
I said UAP programs shorthand. The bill gets a little more specific about it.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Um, at the latest, each UAP record must be publicly disclosed in full no later than 25 years after the record is created, unless the president certifies that continued postponement is necessary because of direct harm to national security. So basically, both the president and the review board have
Right.
the ability to defer
Sure.
declassification, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, for anybody who's counting, 25 years means stuff like Roswell, which happened in 47, would need to be released right away.
Oh,
The
interesting.
Nimitz Tic Tac incident, which was in 2004, would be declassified in about 6 years. And
Oh, so
the
I thought it
Roosevelt
was
gimbal
within
incident,
25 years of hitting the department. Um,
no, yeah, it's 25 years
okay.
from the creation of the individual record.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, and then like the USS Roosevelt incident, which produced the gimbal
Hmm.
video, that was in 2015. That would be in 17 years. So we're not
Yeah.
looking at immediate disclosure of everything, but
Right.
certainly all the historical stuff from the Summer of the Saucers, the
Yeah.
White House UFO flyover, stuff like that. We
Yeah.
would expect to see all of that right away. The Phoenix
Interesting.
Lights,
Right.
right? Yeah.
I mean, as soon as they, you know, they're going to take forever to get through it, though, right?
Yeah, so I don't know how quickly stuff like that gets acted on, but it's saying that the default expectation is 25 years after creation. Now, of course, after the law is passed, there's a 300-day period before the government agencies are expected to turn everything over, and presumably
Right.
it will then take some time for the review board to review the records and
Right.
act on it. But yes, in theory, we could be looking at a year from now, we get a trove of Roswell documents and Blue Book documents and stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. Probably like 3 years if we're realistic. But um, if
Yeah,
Arrow's any indication, because
yeah, yeah,
they won't actually build the program until 295 days from now, or from the
yeah, yeah.
NDAA, and it'll be underfunded and whatever.
So two other things that I think are really interesting about the bill. First of all, you remember there was some shenanigans around UAP, originally stood for anomalous or unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yeah,
So they were asking the Air Force for stuff, and they were
yeah,
like, "Oh, we don't have to tell you about that stuff because it wasn't aerial; it was in
yeah,
space."
yeah. Or is
So
underwater.
they are sidestepping those shenanigans right out the gate. This clarifies that UAP includes anything previously described as UFOs, flying discs, saucers, UAPs. Like, it also clarifies that UAP are distinguished by the five observables that Lou
Hmm,
Elizondo has talked about,
nice.
plus one more. So I had to read this new list because this
Okay,
is the list that they're putting into law.
nice.
So, one, instantaneous acceleration absent apparent inertia. Two, hypersonic velocity absent a thermal signature or sonic shockwave.
Hmm.
Three, transmedium, such as space to ground and air to undersea travel.
Sure.
Four, positive lift contrary to known aerodynamic principles.
Hmm.
Five, multispectral signature control, invisibility.
Okay, all right.
Uh, and six, and this is the new one because those were the five that Lou had. Six, physical or invasive biological effects to close observers and the environment.
Wait, what?
So we've been
Okay,
hearing for a while now that people who get too close to UFOs may be suffering adverse health effects. Gary Nolan was
sure.
supposed to be looking into this. It's been unclear what that means, but we have heard reports over the years of people getting basically sunburns from standing too close. Some people get radiation poisoning. We've seen things like scorch marks on the ground where they land.
Yeah.
So there seems to be some sort of radiant effect around the craft that affects people. This is something Lou has been clear. He's like, this is one of the reasons why we classify them as threats. And threat doesn't necessarily mean hostile. If I stand downrange of an F-18 while it takes off, I'm going to get caught in the backsplash of the
Yeah.
jets. That doesn't mean the jet is hostile. It means I was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Maybe we're
Right.
just in the wrong place around these craft while the engines are on. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Can you read number six again?
Yeah, physical or invasive biological effects to close observers and the environment.
Okay. Interesting. I that feels like it's too broad, but
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't mention UAP, but it shouldn't need to. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think it's just a consideration, right? If they happen to have a report of a UFO that's on the ground and doesn't exhibit any of the five observables, but it gave everybody who approached it radiation sickness and it was bigger on the inside than the outside.
Hmm.
Like that qualifies. So
Yeah.
again, we've talked before about sometimes the language that they use is weirdly specific and it
Yeah.
feels out of place. And what we have seen time and again is when we see these incredibly legally
Yeah.
specific descriptions, almost always it's referencing something Congress knows about that we don't.
Yeah. 3 months later, we see it. It's like, oh, that's what it was.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
The
Well.
other thing it defines, which I think is helpful because you may have missed this, but there was a bit of a hubbub. Susan Goff came out and said Arrow has found no evidence of
Yeah.
extraterrestrial
Yeah.
stuff. And everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh, she's doing weasel words again.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
does extraterrestrial cover non-human? Because Grush was very careful not to say alien or extraterrestrial. So if they're time travelers, they may be
Yeah.
non-human, but they're not extraterrestrial. So someone
Okay.
put the question to Susan Goff. She actually clarified that extraterrestrial in that case covered non-human. But
Okay.
just as another effort to sidestep shenanigans around it, the bill clarifies what non human intelligence means.
Oh.
So it says the term non human intelligence means any sentient, intelligent, non human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomena or of which the federal government has become aware.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I love it. So that would
Right?
cover AI and with, I mean, technically
Mm-hmm.
we would cover dolphins too, but they haven't produced a lot of craft, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like they tie it down to UAP phenomena,
Okay.
which
Yeah,
I
there
think
it
is a
is.
smart
Okay.
thing to do. But
Yeah. Okay.
fuck it. If we find out dolphins are piloting the TikToks, I want to know that too.
Yeah. Right. That'd be amazing. Actually. Yeah. We should get a sixth person on the review board, a marine biologist.
There you go. There you go. All right. So you know how every Apple event since Steve Jobs has ended with, oh, and one more
Just one
thing.
more. Yeah.
So there's a one more thing in this
Yeah.
bill. Additionally, the federal government shall have eminent domain over
Oh.
any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities in the interests of the public good.
Wow.
So
Okay.
last week, Ross Coulthart was talking about the idea that Lockheed and some other places like this, in addition to receiving craft from the government, have done their own private retrievals using their own private military groups. So he was talking about what legal right does the state have to compel you to turn over something that you recovered on your own dime?
Hmm.
Arguably, the state has a case if they say, hey, we gave you this, now you have to give it back to us. But if Lockheed went out and recovered their own UFO out of a hill somewhere, does the state have a right to it? Yeah, Schumer's not having any of it. All your UFOs are belong to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, eminent
Mm-hmm.
domain, that is the key word.
Mm-hmm.
That's in like city planning too.
Yeah.
When they have to like forced by your house to put a new road in.
Yeah.
They claim eminent
Now,
domain.
I
So
don't
yeah, that's.
love it when the government claims eminent domain
I
in
mean, yeah,
general, but
there are
Annie and I were
ramifications.
talking about this a little bit last year. It's really complicated. If a
Oh
UFO crashes, who does it belong to?
yeah,
Who gets the rights to look at it? And while I don't love the idea of the government saying it's ours and it's only ours based on how they have historically behaved, I do think it's a good idea to have a clear legal precedent of if you're some rando billionaire, you don't
yeah,
get to just go grab a UFO and reverse engineer it yourself and tell the
yeah,
government to F off.
yeah.
that's a
Right.
that's a worse precedent.
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't mean that they will exercise their eminent domain, but
Mm-hmm.
that I think it's smart to clarify that that they could. The I think
Yeah.
the challenge there is in a compulsory purchase. What do you pay that billionaire? Like for
Yeah.
a like one of a kind thing that could change the
Right.
world?
And
I
I'll
don't
point out
know.
this doesn't say anything about purchasing. It just says straight up the government owns it. But yes, I agree. I don't know what the outcome of that is. Does that mean there's some compensation? Does
I
it just
mean,
mean you have to give
yeah.
us access to it, but you get to keep it on your property? I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know how it is for like larger things. For houses, yeah, they buy your house at
Hmm.
greater than market rate.
Right.
Um, but what's market rate of a UFO? I don't know.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the aftermath of this bill, because obviously people have been talking about it nonstop. The first thing that I think is important to note is that this bill had strong bipartisan support.
Okay.
It was co-sponsored by Republican Senator Mike Rounds, who I hadn't heard of, but he is
Yeah.
a member of both the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Armed Services Committee. So those are two big
Okay.
name committees
Yeah.
who are backing this bill, as well as Republican Senator Marco Rubio,
Yep.
Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand,
Yep.
Republican Senator Todd Young, and
Hmm.
Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich. So we've
I haven't
got
heard of the last two
strong
either.
bipartisan support across multiple committees, all
Yeah.
backing this bill.
Okay.
Um, it's also worth noting because obviously an amendment to the NDAA has to pass in the Senate,
Right.
has to pass in the House,
Right.
then they have to make sure those bills match, then the final bill goes to the president. So the Senate approving it is only step one.
Right.
But we have a strong indicator here, which is a similar bill was already introduced in the House
Oh,
by
good.
Representative Burchett. Now, that
Okay.
bill was a little narrower in scope, but I would be shocked if we did not see, just like with Gillibrand's earlier amendments, that this was just adopted without much fuss and
Yeah.
passed on to the president.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. I mean, I feel like most senators have bigger fish to fry with the NDAA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the press coverage of this has been really interesting. First of all, it got press coverage.
Yeah.
One of the things that has been disheartening, I guess, about Grush is there has been zero major news coverage of it. Like, it's
Hmm.
just been absolutely silence from them. But
Yeah.
this was covered by NBC News, Reuters, The Hill, Politico, Newsweek, and the New York Times.
Yeah.
We haven't heard from the New York Times since Grush happened. Now, to be fair, the New York Times article about it doesn't mention Grush by name. They do have a really funny quote where they kind of dance around what he said without mentioning him. They said, uh, government assertions that they do not have the remains of crashed alien spacecraft have been challenged by some former officials who believe the government is not divulging all it knows.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
uh, our our good friend Gary Nolan chimed in and said, maybe they don't want to remind anyone that they were given the opportunity to run the story and they passed on it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Matthew Pines, the director of intelligence at Krebs Stamos Group, noted something really interesting. He said, note that this was drafted with bipartisan support in complete secrecy. There were no leaks of this until the New York Times got it 24 hours before it was released. But it is
Oh.
clear that the New York Times didn't get the full bill. It was just a bomb dropped on the DC press.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. A
Yeah, that
bill at
is.
this level with this many people involved and no one talking about it. Yeah, I don't know how common that is.
Yeah, me
Certainly
either.
not with the UAP stuff being as as hot a topic as it has been.
Yeah, and is it complete secrecy or is it just I mean, I guess they didn't write a press release about it. And that's unusual. Uh, I guess
Well, think about
secrecy
how much
implies
we've been
that they're
hearing
hiding.
from Burchett and
Yeah,
Gillibrand and Rubio, right? Like
that's true.
they're talking to the press about this nonstop, and nobody mentioned this. So yes, there
Yeah,
was no press release, but also nobody hinted at it,
yeah,
nobody teased it,
and that is
nobody,
unusual.
leaked it.
Yeah,
Like it's not inconceivable someone could have leaked it to one of the newspapers
yeah,
early and put some pressure on them. Nothing.
yeah, yeah. I guess that is interesting. So maybe that does imply secrecy.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Now, we've got a bunch of reactions from the community here. First of all, longtime supporter of the show, Chris UFO Daddy Mellon,
All right.
came out with a rather pessimistic response. Chris, I'm sorry.
No.
He said, although this is very encouraging, until and unless the overly restrictive UAP security classification guide is revised, there
Hmm.
will be little public benefit, as virtually all recent data, including UAP videos, will be classified.
Yeah.
Congress should press ahead for the guidance to be revised.
Yeah.
Now, I trust that Chris knows more than I do about this, but I'm a little confused because that seems to contradict what the bill says. The bill says all of this stuff is declassified. You have to make a case for why it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think what Chris is probably saying is
It's going to
the
be really
military's
easy.
reaction would be it should continue to be
Yeah.
classified. But the thing is, the military isn't the one deciding whether it's classified, it's the president and the review board.
Yeah. But the
Unless
review
we're
board,
jumping to the conclusion that the review board is populated by people who are on the military side and think it should all be secret, or if we're on the assumption that the president is in on the secret and is part of the problem,
hmm,
I'm not necessarily with him that this stuff would automatically stay classified. I'm
I,
more
yeah.
concerned with the 25-year timeline than I am with whether they're just going to keep everything classified. Like,
No, I think I think what he's getting at is it's gonna be really fucking easy to mark, it's gonna be easier to mark something
mhm,
as defer it
mhm,
because, this was taken with a relatively recent drone that we're still using
sure,
or
sure.
whatever. And so anything like that until the
Mhm,
last one
mhm,
of those drones is rolled out of gold,
mhm,
destroyed,
mhm.
like that's just going to be automatic classified.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I,
Now, I hope again that the 25-year timeline will help with that, right? Like, by the time 25 years is up, the like 2001 era Reaper drone that we took it with is no longer like the top of the line tech. But yeah, who
but is
knows?
it
I,
still
I
running?
I agree that there's some wiggle room here. Someone pointed out under Schumer's legislation, the president could decide to delay material the commission has chosen to release based on national security concerns. But the thing that's important here is the measure would establish a timetable to release documents and codify the presumption that the material should be public. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of on the optimistic side of this. Even if we think it's going to go just like JFK, where the really juicy stuff remains secret essentially
yeah,
forever, it is still helpful to have it
yeah,
on the books that the default stance is this shit is not secret. They may make a case to keep it secret, but right now it's completely ambiguous and it's easy to make the case anything on this topic should be secret. This
yeah,
helps put it into law. No, by default it should be public. You need to tell us why it isn't.
So
Um,
I wonder the what he's meaning by the overly restrictive UAP security classification guide. Is that a military guide that's in addition to this?
I think what he's talking about is there's been a lot of FOIA requests lately, the Black Vault requesting things, and they keep getting back, no, that's classified, no, that's classified,
Yeah,
and we're getting these mixed messages. On the one hand, we can't give you this video of a UFO recorded out of the cockpit because the cockpit itself is classified, even if the thing they're filming isn't. But
yeah,
at the
right,
same time, they'll release the selfie that the U-2 pilot took of the Chinese spy balloon. You know, like we get
right.
these cockpit videos all the time when it suits the military. You know, when they need to release drone footage of some other country doing something inappropriate, we see that shit within 24 hours.
Yeah,
When it's about UFOs, oh no, it's all secret. So I believe that's what he's referring to. It's just that the default stance on this is everything's secret, and the easy thing to hammer on is because it was taken with military tech, the military tech itself is classified.
yeah. Interestingly, the so Black Vault did a FOIA request for security classification guide in air quotes,
Uh-huh.
um, specifically which pertains to UAP, UAPTF, ATIP, whatever.
Yeah, he's got
And
a whole list of keywords he always includes.
yeah, and basically, so uh, they they located one record with 10 pages, and it is classified.
Yeah, that tracks.
So I'm wondering if that's what Chris Mellon is talking about, and if there's some
Yeah,
additional things in there that's going to make it difficult for that review board
yeah,
yeah. Anyways,
that could be. I mean, I think we're going around in circles here, but
yeah,
I
but you're
I
right. It's
agree
still an
with
important.
people that
It,
yeah,
it's still an
yeah, I
important opening, right? Like we got to
yeah.
start from
I don't
somewhere.
think this is going to be the end of the road. I don't
Yeah,
think this is disclosure with a capital D, but I think it's a really, really big step. And,
yeah,
you know, like just codifying this stuff into law that, yes, the public has a right to know.
yeah,
Let's
and
get to a few other reactions.
yeah,
Ross Coulthart said, these proposed UAP laws are quite extraordinary. They openly concede the possibility that someone is concealing recovered non Earth technologies and biological evidence, such as bodies. If passed, there is no going back from what these laws might soon reveal. And I think that's an important point because we're kind of talking about this like the JFK assassination, where like, okay, there's some really juicy stuff that's still classified and we've gotten a lot of information about the assassination, but we haven't gotten the CIA paid Oswald to do it. You know, like,
yeah,
but that isn't the situation we're dealing with UFOs, right? With JFK, the footage of him being assassinated was already public. The fact that he was assassinated was public. The name of the
right,
assassin was public. You know, there are details, but like the broad facts were already public. In this case, we got nothing.
yeah, right.
So if
There's a
we
lot
get
there.
literally one bit of evidence that says, yes, we have recovered a non human craft in 1945, we're not telling you about anything that's happened
Yeah. Holy shit.
more recently.
Confetti
Well,
cannons. Like,
that's it. I mean,
yeah, it's,
everything else is details. That's the news. That's the part we need.
yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
Yeah. So a few other reactions. Joe Khalil, who is a News Nation correspondent, said Senate Majority Leader Schumer backing legislation to declassify UFO records is significant in that he is likely the highest ranking member of Congress to ever get behind a measure like this. I think
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah, that makes
So
sense.
yeah, you know, we've been talking about how this is becoming less and less stigmatized
Yeah,
within Congress. You know,
yeah,
you kind of like take baby steps into the flight safety, and then you move on to the maybe there's been some inappropriateness around reporting to Congress. And now we've got, freaking Schumer saying, if the government has UFO secrets, it has to tell the public. Like
Yeah.
that's a big step for the Senate Majority Leader to take.
Yeah.
Um, Merrick von Rennenkampf, who's a former DoD official and he's an opinion writer at The Hill, said, given the decades long stigma associated with UAP, the level of credibility, specificity, and corroboration of the underlying intel must have been extraordinary to make it a priority for the US's top lawmaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's another really important point is like, yeah, this, like all the other things we've seen, this doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like this happens because he's seen things. And just like the press release said, um, they didn't hear from one person or two people. They heard from a what was the
A vast web.
a vast web, right?
Yeah.
Lots and lots of people coming to them. So to hear enough people that Schumer, who, as far as I know, has not really commented on this topic before, suddenly drops this bomb into the deep end of the
Yeah.
pool, it must have been extraordinary. I think that's a
Yeah.
really intelligent point.
Yeah.
Now, the last point that people were making, and this actually got clarified this morning.
Okay.
So I had a note in here that this was an open question. I now have the answer.
Yeah.
So Contramundi on Twitter said, there is a near 0% chance that Majority Leader Schumer would introduce this bill without direct and intimate consultation from the White House. This kicked off a whole discussion on Reddit where people are like, is that true? I don't remember much from civics class, but I don't think they
Yeah.
necessarily walk in lockstep. A couple people commented on it. Swank 5000 said, especially with the presidential campaigns and election around the corner, it is nearly a 100% guarantee that they are coordinating on this. They, Biden and Schumer, are the number one and number two leaders of their party, and arguably the two most powerful individuals in DC. There is no doubt in my mind that they are in lockstep on this.
You would hope so.
You'd hope so, yeah. And then Search Prestigious on Reddit said, Chuck Schumer isn't just any senator. He's the Senate Majority Leader. He would not have done anything without the blessing of the White House and guarantees there is actually something to disclose. Control of the Senate rests on a knife's edge. Imagine all of this goes nowhere. They wouldn't take that chance. I think that's another interesting point. Like it's easy to think like, oh, presidential elections are coming up. Schumer, don't do anything that would jeopardize Biden's chance. But this is another way to view it, which is Schumer wouldn't do anything that would embarrass the Democrats in the Senate, because if he does, there's a chance they lose the Senate. So it's really important that if he comes forward with something, that he is rock solid. So when I wrote up my notes, that was still an open question. Is he working with the White House? Liberation Times put out an article this morning, said sources have disclosed to Liberation Times that although fronting the new legislation, Senator Chuck Schumer's staff and others in the Senate have been in coordination with various quarters of the U.S. government, including the White House and its National Security Council, to create the language.
Okay.
So yeah, this was not out of nowhere. This was in coordination with the White House. That doesn't necessarily mean Biden himself knew about it, but at the very least, it's not going to be like, Biden's reading the paper this morning like, wait, he did what?
What? Yeah. Okay. Man. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
It's super cool. Oh my God. What a week.
What a week. What exciting times.
It's a very exciting time. Oh my God. I've just been spinning in circles. I can't remember if I mentioned at the top of the episode, but like you asked me, like, are we recording this week? You were like, I think it's a skip week. And I'm like, no, we're recording. Like I was totally off, but it's just because there's been so much stuff happening. I'm like, oh my God, like, of course we're recording this week. We can't not talk about this. literally called the UAP Disclosure Bill. Like, they didn't like call it some like, flight safety correction. Like,
Yeah.
no, like
Yeah.
UAP Disclosure Bill. Buck wild.
Totally
Absolutely
wild.
crazy.
Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe we're a weekly now. That's cool by me.
Yeah, I mean, at least as far as stuff keeps happening, like I wouldn't mind going back to bi-weekly, but yeah, I I entered into when you were on break. I was like, I'm gonna put out like one podcast while Chuck's gone,
Yeah, right?
and then it was like Grush drops. You and I talked about that. Then week 2, it was like, here's how everybody's reacting to Grush. And that was week 3, and then Gillibrand's amendments dropped, and now Schumer's amendments drop, and like
Yeah.
now on the 27th, we've got the House hearing, and between now and then, they're going to announce the witnesses who will be at the hearing, and like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
madness.
Dude, I'm looking at our analytics are hilarious as well. When I
Yeah.
left, our audience size on Spotify was, 7. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
now, now it's 217. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
some shit happened.
Yeah. We
Clearly, I
can no
need to go
longer
on
say that
vacation
we
more
have,
often.
yeah, we can no longer say that we have tens of listeners.
Yeah,
We
right.
Well, and
There are
also those
dozens.
Spotify stats, so those
Yeah.
roll in the Apple podcast stats, which is the
Mm,
bulk of our listeners,
okay.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't include YouTube. We've added
Yeah.
YouTube, and there's an audience on YouTube too. So
Yeah.
hey YouTube.
Hi, YouTube. Yeah, that's absolutely wild. Um,
Yeah.
Very cool.
So the last thing I want to say, and I'm springing this on Chuck too, but
Okay.
I'm putting it out there. I have been really hesitant to do anything around money on this podcast.
Yeah.
It feels dirty to me. I don't want to run ads or anything like
Yeah.
that. But I have been getting increasing pressure, including from Annie, my wife, but also from a designer I used to work with, Smith, who's currently at Spotify,
Hmm.
said like, look, people expect to, that you need to pay the bills. So I'm putting it out there. How do you feel about us maybe putting up a Patreon? Is that something
I
you'd
love
be
it.
interested in?
Yeah, I mean, we gotta get
If it
you
is,
audio equipment and stuff. Like,
yeah.
I don't know,
So
whatever.
if anybody out there is maybe interested in backing us on Patreon, drop us a line. You can email us, Scott or
Yeah.
Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. You can hit me up on Twitter or Blue Sky as Space Ninja. But I'm just kind of feeling it out. I don't want to put it up and guilt anybody into it. This will always be a free podcast. Nobody should
Yeah.
feel like they have to. But if people want to give us money, it'd be stupid to say no.
Yeah,
As
right.
Chuck said, we've been doing this long enough that we're finally like buying microphones and stuff.
Yeah. It's
So
wild.
there are
Uh,
some costs associated with it.
and I think there's something beautiful about like we haven't done a Discord or anything like that,
Hmm.
but I do think there's value in um, like I think messages on Patreon are a great way of
Hmm.
getting that notification through. Although,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you say, you're on Twitter all the time. You're very easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, that was awkward, but like I
yeah,
said, let us know if it's something you'd be interested in. We have not made up our mind about this at all. As I said, I just
yeah.
dropped this on Chuck unexpectedly.
Just dude, just
But
plug it in. Whatever.
plug it
Make the
in. We'll
Patreon.
see.
People can subscribe if they want to. I know you don't want to
That's what
talk about
Annie
this
said
shit,
too.
but
I don't know. Okay.
just fucking
We'll
do it.
see. Maybe by the time you see this, there will already be a Patreon. Check the show notes.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. It has been a buck wild week. I
Oh,
really appreciate everyone who listens to us. It's great. We really value you as an audience. And as
yeah.
always, Chuck, thank you for listening to me talk about UFOs so Annie doesn't have to.